before we begin, let's recite Surah Al-Fatiha as a gift to Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, to our teachers, to our predecessors, and also with the intention that this session will be able to proceed smoothly, and that it will be a means for us to get closer to Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Lahadini wa kullu niyatin salihah. Al-Fatiha. So Alhamdulillah, we have Ustaz Abdul Mateen Abu Bakar with us today to grace our second session for the Blossoming Barakah series. So Ustaz, inshallah, will be sharing more about the different traits of Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala that can be found in Surah Al-Mulk, and also how to develop God consciousness in us, and to always have reliance upon Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala in everything that we do. Okay, before I hand over my time to Ustaz, let me just give a brief introduction about Ustaz Abdul Mateen. So Ustaz Abdul Mateen Abu Bakar Hashim completed his formal education at Madrasah Al-Junid Al-Islamiyah, where the late Sheikh Abdul Maqsud Faris, Ustaz Muhammad Fir, and Ustaz Khairuddin Abdul Hamid Rahimahumullah were among his teachers. He received his diploma specializing in the study of tafsir at Ma'had Al-Isaniya in Penang, Malaysia, and then continued to study the same course as a final year degree student at Al-Azhar University in Egypt. Since 2002, Ustaz has been teaching Arabic and Islamic studies, tafsir, hadith, sirah, tarikh, tasawwur Islam, tawhid, aqidah, and akhlaq at various mosques and organizations such as Darul Akram, Pergas, and Safina. Ustaz was also involved with developing content for two of the Youth Alive series under MUIS, and content creation for one of the subjects for secondary school level madrasah textbook. Ustaz has also served at Pergas as an honorary council member from 2015 to 2017. Since 2014, Ustaz has been with Upkim Resources and is currently serving as a resident scholar and conducts training in premarital workshops. Aside from sharing knowledge on Islam, Ustaz also enjoys design work and plans to join UX or digital product design in the near future. Yeah. So before I hand over my time to Ustaz, please do scan this QR code at the front. So this is actually linked to our Slido dashboard, where you can all send in your questions if you have any questions along the way. And inshallah, Ustaz will be addressing those questions during our Q&A after the sharing. So, okay. So without further ado, let me now welcome Ustaz Abdul Mateen. Ustaz, please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Okay, so the slide is uploading, inshallah. How many Zoom participants do we have, inshallah? 100? 23, okay. Bismillah. So let's go to the first slide. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that La yu'minu ahadukum. Okay, you will not be considered as a believer. This is very difficult for me to navigate. So if you allow me to just be a bit slanted, inshallah, to see the slides. Okay, so you'll not enter paradise until you believe. La yu'minu ahadukum hatta la yadkhulul jannah hatta tahabu wa la tahabu hatta tu'minu aw la adullukum ila shay'in idha fa'altumuhu tahabbtum afshu salama bainakum. So this will be the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. You will not enter paradise until you have faith. Okay, iman. Consider a person of believer, consider a person of faith. And you will not have faith until you love one another. Okay, so show love, express love, receive love from one another. Okay, next slide, inshallah. Shall I give you something in which it will be guided, in which if you do it, it will increase your love for one another. The Prophet mentioned this to the companions, and the companions acknowledged, yes, Ya Rasulullah. So then the Prophet said, this will increase your love towards one another, which will be afshu salama bainakum. Okay, to spread or to promote the greetings of peace among all of you. Okay, so we start with this hadith. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. right? So even for the fellow participants, inshallah, from the Zoom. Okay, so here we have, just to inform, where do I look at? I look at the camera, right? Yeah, that we have, alhamdulillah, a good number of young, committed, dedicated students from NUS. Maybe there might be other people from other tertiary levels, or maybe those from Zoom as well. So hopefully we are collectively benefiting from each other from the Quran. We're benefiting from each other in terms of this presence, inshallah. Okay. Then next would be what we've already started with, which is reciting Bismillah and also the Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay, so there's even a hadith where the Prophet mentioned any activity which begins without reciting Bismillah is considered as cut off from blessings. Okay, so we've already started, alhamdulillah, with the chairman or the MC, our moderator, with the readings from the Quran, recitations from the Quran. So we hope to gain the benefit and the mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. There's another hadith, which is the next slide, that talks about one of the best surahs in the Quran. And this will be Surah Al-Fatiha. So why do we start off with Surah Al-Fatiha? Whenever there's a lesson, whenever some talk or speech or whoever it is that gives a form of sharing session, we'll start with the Fatiha. So inside the Fatiha, there is the Basmala, which is the first verse. And this is also considered as one of the best surahs in the Quran, one of the best chapters in the Quran. Okay, this is based on a hadith, a prophetic narration, that the Prophet ﷺ was with a companion, okay, unnamed. We don't know this companion. But then the Prophet said, before we exit the mosque of the Prophet ﷺ, I will teach you one of the best surahs, one of the best chapters in the Quran. Okay. So then they were about to exit the masjid, and that companion asked, Ya Rasulullah, what was the surah? Okay. Then the Prophet said, Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay. So alhamdulillah, we've done this. So allow me to also share, starting off with collection of supplications. Okay. So you find this supplication, some you might find in the Quran. Okay. So for example, the supplication, the dua, or sometimes translated as prayers, okay, saying of prayers. And this would be the dua, the supplication of Prophet Musa alayhi salam. So for us, our tradition is that we have something which is documented in the Quran 1,400 years ago, what was mentioned by Prophet Musa alayhi salam, Sayyidina Musa. Okay. Qala rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Oh Allah, expand my heart for me and ease my task for me, and loosen the knot in my tongue that they may understand my speech. Next. Rabbi zidni ilma. We ask Allah to increase us in knowledge. Okay, so we find this in the same chapter in a different verse. Okay, so inshallah I will share the slides. So it's okay if you don't manage to go jot down certain notes from the slides. I will inshallah make it possible for you to have access to it through PDF, even for the fellow participants on Zoom, inshallah. Okay, next would be a collection of dua you find from scholars. Okay, Allahumma akhrijna min zulumatil wahmi wa akrimna bi nuril fahmi. We ask Allah to alleviate us from ignorance and speculations and grant us the light of comprehension and understanding. Waftah alayna bi ma'rifatil ilm wa sahil akhlaqana bil hilm. Okay, next, and allow us to receive the blessings of knowledge and make it easy for us to achieve good character with forbearance. Waj'alna mimman yastami'una al-qawla fayattabi'una ahsanah. Within the Quran, you find a verse that Allah said, those who follow the Quran and follow it to the best of their ability, they are the ones who are considered as the successful ones. So we ask Allah to enable us to be among them. Okay, next. We ask Allah, oh Allah, Allahumma astur aiba mu'allimi anni wa la tudhib barakata ilmihi minni. We ask Allah to cover our teachers' faults from all of us and do not take the spiritual blessings away from us. Right, next would be a collection of dua in which scholars consider as crafted by learned men such as Imam Abdullah ibn Alawi Haddad. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Nawaitu at-ta'alluma wa ta'alim wa tadhakkura wa tadhkir wa naf'a wal intifa' wal ifada wal istifada wal hath ala tamasuki bi kitabillahi wa sunnati rasulih sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa du'a wa da'wa ila al-huda wa dalala wa dilala ala al-khair ibtigha wajhillahi wa mardatihi wa qurbi wa thawabihi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, the meaning of this would be that all of us, we hope to make the intention, the next slide, okay, we make the intention to learn and to benefit, and also to teach others, to remind ourselves, to remind others, to encourage people holding on to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and also the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, calling people towards guidance, guiding people towards good. And in doing all this, we seek the countenance, pleasure, proximity from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so you can include this whenever you start to engage with expert scholars, whenever you start to benefit from other learned men, whenever you start from reading books, etc. Inshallah. Okay. Lastly would be that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect all of us from teaching something without first granting us observance in whatever it is that we are practicing, which is the next slide. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So bear with the transitioning. It can be a bit tricky. Okay. So we ask Allah to protect all of us from teaching something without first granting us success in its observance. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. Okay, so this will be how I start off my lessons, whether in a physical format or on Zoom. So hopefully we benefit it. And again, we can make this dua collectively, inshallah. Okay. All right. So to start off, let me just introduce myself. We've had that excellent write up, read up, but there's actually three, I wouldn't say imposter, I would say young asatiza. I'm the senior one. Okay. So sometimes some people will say, oh, I studied from Ustaz Mateen. Which Ustaz Mateen? So people can just claim anyhow. There's actually three different Ustaz Mateen. Okay. Mine is easiest to remember. After my name, it's Abu Bakar, the first companion of the Prophet ﷺ, first caliph. The other two, they start with Muhammad, Sayyidina Muhammad ﷺ. Okay. Yeah. All right. I mean, we have some in common. We are all three of us. We are slim. I'm the eldest one. We are not related. We all look like Chinese. Okay. Just now I took Grab. The driver thought I was from Myanmar. Okay. That was a first for me. Back then, people would think I'm from Philippines. Where else? Let me see. I don't speak any Tagalog. Pasinsian Apokayo. What else? Indonesia, Thailand. So there's a lot of different. I'm actually Singaporean. Okay. All right. Next slide, inshallah. So for us to, before we delve into Surah Al-Mulk, okay, inshallah, all of you are comfortable, right? Now, there's no tense moment, or if you're not comfortable with each other, you can start to state. I will, inshallah, try and make it possible for you to interact with the person next to you. So you're not just stuck looking at the slide or looking at me or looking at your phones or whatever it is. But inshallah, you will be interacting with the person in front of you, next to you, inshallah, or behind you as well. Okay. So to start off, before we talk about Surah Al-Mulk, I would like to set the stage because I'm not so sure who here knows me. Anyone other than the MC? No, right? Nobody. I've been here before, not this particular room, but the Qur'an, the Immense Ocean program in 2018. Alhamdulillah, good group of people. Similarly, they are very quiet. They are very humble. I mean, looks like you guys are very hardworking, studious, dedicated, committed. Inshallah, hopefully Allah give that consistency, inshallah. I mean, okay. So to start off, and again, sometimes whenever I share and whenever I recommend books or whatever it is, I'm not so sure who is benefiting because I don't really know one of you, each of you in terms of your background, in terms of whether you are familiar with certain technical terms in Arabic, with certain Islamic terms, right? So it could be possible that you might be unfamiliar. Okay, so I will inshallah set the stage with the next slide. That sometimes this is a question, or this is something which is like a claim. Okay, that human beings, okay, whether the person is a mosque-going individual or the person is a Muslim by name, right? But the individual might sometimes make claims that can be considered Islamic, but in reality, it's not really Islamic. Am I making sense? Does it make sense? So far, so good? Okay, example. Yep. What we do is we monopolize. Okay, this is maybe, is this US or UK spelling? So there's this spell checker. Okay, so we monopolize the religion. What does it mean when we monopolize the religion? So feel free to just shout out. The Zoom people are not looking at you. What does it mean when do you understand the statement? What does it mean when we monopolize the religion? So example of monopolizing the religion, oh, I shouldn't have nodded my head. So example, hello MC. Okay, Bismillah. Sometimes, example, you see in the thought bubble. Okay, the first one, on the right, on my right, or on the left. Okay, my understanding, reading, knowledge of Islam is better. Have you heard of this before? Or my Qur'an is better than others. My understanding of Islam, my whatever it is, my exposure, etc. The other one would be God is with me. Okay, you monopolize not just the religion, monopolize the intimacy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Saying that, oh, okay, next example will be that, you know, I think I am favored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah, because I'm so blessed, I'm so lucky to achieve this, etc. So sometimes it is something which is subtle or something which can be considered as shaitanic, devilish, okay, even though it appears to be Islamic. Okay, so they say the mosque is the aura free zone. Aurat, you know, aurat, right? Nakedness. Okay, but it's actually not shaitan free zone. Even though there's the Quran, there's the prayer, there's the adhan, still shaitan is possible to exist in that area. Okay, next. So this is another example, bro. I just did istikhara. You know, I did istikhara and it didn't work out. So yeah, it's Allah planned it for it to be like this. So you monopolize the concept, Islamic concepts. Okay. So why am I starting with this? Okay. In order for us to understand that sometimes we need to have a step back, to look into what we are doing or what we are thinking or what we are practicing as Muslims. Okay. All right, next slide, inshallah. So when we go further, okay, so we reorient ourselves. So you have orientation, right? So this is orientation, but reorientation to Islam. Okay, and again, I'm setting the stage because it's something which is very basic, but sometimes it can be neglected. We are blind. What is it? We blindsided. Is it blindsided? Yeah, we have blind spots. Okay, all right. So to look at how we can approach it in a way where we understand basic Islam. So we go to the slide. That there is these three different dimensions. I'm sure you are familiar with all the three different dimensions. Are you familiar? Okay, the concept of Islam, the concept of Iman, the concept of Ihsan. Okay, and in the middle is actually the concept that you're supposed to achieve the balanced state, which is fitrah. Okay, so you can be someone who's practicing Islam, but not really someone who exercises at ihsan, or someone who might have certain doubts regarding certain things within the concept of the belief system. Okay, and it's not something which is haram to have doubts. To have doubts in the sense that you are searching for whatever that can be logical to your own senses. Okay, right. Next. So this concept of fitrah, okay, is trying to achieve this balance in a way where we can acknowledge our religion. And the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that ma min mauludin, and there's a different narration as well, kullu mauludin yuladu ala al-fitra. Every child is born in a state of natural inclination to submit to God. Okay, so the lifestyle of the parents start to change the perception, change the lifestyle of their child. So in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was mentioned, فَأَبَوَاهُ يُهَوِّدَانُهُ أَوْ يُنَصِّرَانُهُ أَوْ يُمَجِّسَانُهُ. The parents might shape the child to become more similar to the lifestyle of the ones who were existing during the time of the Prophet. The community of the Judeo-Christian religious, tradition, they follow those traditions. Okay, or the other one would be Zoroastrianism. Okay, yeah. So these are existing during the time of Prophet. So scholars, how do they interpret? What does it mean? It means the person might be living life cut off from anything which has to do with religion, cut off with anything which has to do with spiritual excellence, totally materialistic. Okay, all right. Next, Bismillah. So when we look at this, how do we approach? Okay, that's a bit of a question. How do we understand this? We understand the diagram, we understand the concepts, And sometimes I prefer to break it down, because one of the organizations that I share the knowledge of Islam, after learning the responsibility to share the knowledge of Islam, especially to those who are totally unfamiliar with Islam. Okay, so I have to break it down. What does it mean when you talk about Islam? It means pillars of practice. How do you become a practicing Muslim? Okay, there might be those who claim, maybe in other countries, right? But they say that they are Muslim, but they are not practicing, non-practicing Muslim, meaning the person doesn't go to the mosque or pray, or pray at all, or fasting, etc. Okay. Next will be belief system. Okay, then next will be, after belief system, will be the spiritual excellence. So how do we approach? We approach through two different categories of knowledge. One will be personal obligation or individual obligation. The other one would be collective or communal. Have you heard of this before? What's the Arabic term? Why did I sit at the front? The brother who read the Qur'an. I'm sure the Ustaz will ask me. The direct eye contact, the person behind, okay, Alhamdulillah, there's a barrier. Anyone? Bismillah, sisters. What's the first one? Personal obligation or individual obligation? What is it called? Fardu Ain, naam. Okay. So the next slide shows that there are two different categories: the Fardu Ain and Fardu Kifayah. Okay, personal obligation or individual obligation. The other one will be communal. Any example? Anyone can give me an example? Sorry? Seeking knowledge is considered as communal, collective, or individual? Individual. Everyone must seek knowledge. Okay, Bismillah. Next slide. Okay, so we look at this example. The one on Fardu Ain is not a squid game. It's actually, or not shrouded, not a person who's shrouded. It's a Muslimah covering nakedness, covering the figure, etc. The other one is communal obligation, taking care of elderly. Okay, yeah. So this will be examples, and again, this is just reminding ourselves. Okay, so if let's say you're not familiar with this, then the best is to bridge the gap, meaning you figure out what will be the knowledge gaps that you have. Try to figure out where is the best place for me to learn. Who would be the best person to share with me, to explain with me this knowledge. Okay. All right. Next. So when we look at this, is it interchangeable? Now is the question for you to try and ask the person next to you. What do you think? Is it interchangeable? Do knowledge or whatever it is that is considered as a personal obligation, does it become a communal obligation, or the communal obligation becomes a personal obligation? Am I confusing you? Are you okay? So is it interchangeable? What do you think? Yes or no? Again, we are all learning, so it's okay. Don't worry, this is not an exam. So even if you get wrong answers, it's okay. We are learning. Okay? Yeah. The people from Zoom as well, you can answer, inshallah, whether it is interchangeable. Don't cheat and look at the next mini slide. Maybe you can see it. Okay, since I mentioned it, then you already saw it. You cannot unsee it. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay. So it's possible that certain things which are considered as a communal obligation becomes personal obligation. But your personal obligation cannot become something which is communal. Does that make sense? So meaning your fasting, you cannot leave it to others. Son, why don't you fast for me? This Ramadan, I think is very difficult for me, so you fast for me. Okay, or you make subuh prayer, you make Maghrib prayer twice, one for me, one for you. So I don't need to perform. I want to go eat ice cream or something. Okay, so it doesn't work that way. It cannot become something which is communal. You cannot put that obligation on others. But certain things in Islam where it is an obligation for you to fulfill within the community, if nobody does it, then you take up the role and it becomes something which is an obligation for you to do so. Okay, so all of you might be fulfilling something which is a personal obligation, or you might be fulfilling something which is fardu kifayah. Okay, so future leaders, what else? I'm sure that there might be some who are studying engineering. I think it's a popular course. Whenever I'm here or unless there's no engineering person here, which is a first for me. Engineering actually. Okay, or you might be future teachers, you might be future doctors. Wallahu alam. Hopefully, we ask Allah for the best. Okay. All right. Next. So whenever we look at this, we have to understand that in life, whatever role that you fulfill as an individual from the day you are born, okay, the first one, the first icon is not a peanut or whatever it is. It's actually, or even a GPS, or no, it's actually a baby. Okay, not babies. What was Squid Game? No. Okay. Meaning, once you are born in this world, you have an obligation to be the best child, and this is in line with our purpose in life. So we go back to the main major questions for the individual, for the Muslim, for the human being to reflect on. What is our purpose? What is the purpose of living life in this world? Okay. So once you are born, you're considered as a child. So you have the obligation to be good children to parents. If you have a sibling, you become the best brother or best sister or best elderly or younger sibling. Okay. Next, you enter school, you become the best student. Okay. That is the Khalifa role. That is the caretaker, the stewardship, or vice-regent, vice-jiran. You can find it a lot of different ways to describe it. Caliph, being a Khalifa. Okay. So then next, when we look at this, we understand that it will go further until we no longer live life in this world. So once you enter, we are still in the school setting, you're studying, you become the best student. Islam is teaching me that this is the best characteristic that I'm supposed to be trying my best to fulfill. And this is in line with the Sharia, with my Islamic secret law. Okay. So once I finish, I start to work, I become the best worker. I have colleagues, I have subordinates, I am now the manager, whatever it is, you have to be the best manager. Later on, you enter into a family setting, you become the best spouse. Okay, what's next after spouse? I keep looking at you. Sorry. You're the closest ever. Bismillah. Oh, after, yeah, you become parents. After you get married in Singapore setting, after you get married, what happens next? You buy a house, right? Unless you're cheapskate, you stay at your parents' place. So you buy a house. What happens once you buy a house? You take, you fulfill loans, financial obligation. You become the best house owner. No, it's actually you have neighbors. Suddenly you're in a different environment. People, you are suddenly attached to a different set or a different group of people. Okay, so neighbors, you have to be the best neighbor. What else? Once you have children, you become the best parents. You have to try to learn. So that is an element of ihsan as well. It's an element of practice, Islam. You believe that what you're doing is something which is acknowledged by Allah with the good intention, that is a belief system. And what you're doing, you're trying your best to do the best, which is ihsan, spiritual excellence. Okay. So it goes on until when you become grandparents, later on you're lonely, you pick up pets, you become the pet owner. You have to make sure you don't oppress your pet. You feed the pet until become bloated like, I don't know, Garfield, etc. That is abuse. So you cannot abuse. Okay. All right, next. So when we talk about all this, it is to remind ourselves that whatever we do in life, we are experiencing personal struggles, hardship, etc. Allah is central to that experience. So you cannot take out Allah from all the three different elements. Yes, Islam practices, whatever that you're doing, Iman, whatever that you believe in, right? It must be something which is Allah-centric. Similarly, what you're doing is, in the sense, becoming someone closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is the spiritual excellence. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, good. Next. Bismillah. So then we can proceed to what is mentioned in the surah, in Surah Al-Mulk. Okay, talking about characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, for some, they've already known all this. They've studied, they have alhamdulillah, their fardu ayn is good, etc. But sometimes we want to approach it differently. So if, for example, because sometimes we want to understand, we're not questioning, we're not challenging whatever that is in the Quran, whatever that is considered as the teachings of Islam, but we want more accurate understanding in the sense that we can also explain to others. because whatever that is given in the Quran, we already acknowledge it. As Muslims, we are considered as the ones who acknowledge, we believe it's divine, right? But if let's say I have a friend, and again, I'm telling this because I have to break it down to simplify it. It's possible to approach acknowledging the existence of God, not just through the Quran, through looking at personal experiences, for example. Okay, the person has a whatever it is, tragedy, etc., and they get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through their own experiences. Okay, so it's very personal to the individual. It could be different. What else? You can reason in terms of philosophical reasoning. There's a time in the history of the Muslim civilizations where Muslim scholars, they had to encounter philosophical ideas, statements coming from non-Muslims. So they had to try to figure it out. How is it possible for us to describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to those who don't subscribe to our philosophy, our understanding, our POV? Okay. So what do? It could be possible using the Kalam cosmological argument. What else? You can use other different ways to navigate all this sophistry, all this philosophy. Any philosophy student here? Zero. It's not popular. Yeah. Okay. Or maybe you just quietly don't want to acknowledge yourself as a philosophy student. Okay. So let's go to the slide. In Surah Al-Mulk, you find in the first verse, there are 4 divine attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, divine characteristics. Okay, and whenever we look at the surah now, when we have that stage, we have that framework, right? The concept, sometimes I give too much complicated words. The simple understanding of the different dimensions. Now you look at any verse in the Quran, you can try and break it down into those 3. Okay, so I will show you later on. Okay, so the first 4 would be, number 1, that Allah exists. Tabarakalladhi biyadihul mulk. Okay, so in the Quran, there are a lot of different surahs that Allah start with different statements. So it could be letters, alif lam mim, for example, yasin, etc. It could be a statement. It could be a question, yas'alunaka, right? So there's a lot of different ways in which Allah start the chapter in the Quran. Okay, so there are announcement. It could be a question, al-qari'ah, mal-qari'ah, right? So these are all different ways in which Allah start the surah. Okay, so this particular surah starts with tabarak, meaning exalted is the one. Tabarakalladhi biyadihil mulk, the one who's in his hand, al-mulk, dominion, kingdom, sovereignty, etc. Okay, so we acknowledge that Allah exists. Okay, next. Number 2 would be Allah comprehending all the attributes of perfection. Tabarakalladhi biyadihil mulk, and being most exalted. That anyone who starts reading this, we already acknowledge tabaraka, glorify, exalted be to the one who has this dominion. Okay, so we already acknowledge Allah. Next, we acknowledge the perfection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third one would be that Allah is the ruler of the heavens and the earth. Okay, the ruler meaning having control, complete control. Okay, but Allah having complete control doesn't mean that you are at the center of the universe. Okay, next. Lastly would be Allah having power over everything that exists. What does not exist? Give me an example of something that doesn't exist. The sister that is handling the slide transitioning. What doesn't exist? Unicorns, yes. I assume someone might say Santa Claus. Unicorn, okay, we go with unicorn. Doesn't exist. So Allah doesn't control. Because it doesn't exist. Okay? Whatever that exists, that might be something that we have yet to describe or explain. In the deep depths of the ocean, right? There might be other element, whatever it is, that is considered as X, unknown. Right? I think I shared with, because some people they say that modern psychology, modern science, they want to describe everything. They are really, really confused whenever they find a problem that they cannot figure. Well, what is this? Okay. So for example, one example would be if you go YouTube, which I wouldn't recommend because it's very addictive. There's this this documentary on a person who is suffering from foreign accent syndrome. Anyone seen this before? Anyone saw? No. It's very interesting. I'm not joking. It's documented. The person suddenly woke up. I mean, she had an accident or something and woke up with a different accent. Australian. There's a few, two or three Australian. So one was from the UK, woke up with an accent like a Chinese. Very weird. Okay. So they cannot figure it out. They tried scanning their brain scans, whatever, they cannot figure it out. Okay. So similarly, I think in the Southeast Asian context, we have something in for example, Malaysia. Singapore, we don't have it much. A Malaysian phenomenon, psychological phenomenon, which is called melata. Anyone heard of melata? Lata, L-A-T-A-H. Something they cannot figure it out. The closest is a group of people in France. The jumping men or something. Anyone heard of this? Yeah. Don't ask me why I know all this. Yeah. Too much time on the internet. Okay. All right. Yeah. It's like it's not Tourette syndrome. It's something which is weird. It's not shell shock, etc. It's a different, totally uncategorized. They don't know how to figure it out. So there's a lot of different things that in life, it's a mystery. You want to know? My best answer, because I teach youngsters, I tell them the best answer that you want to figure out: dinosaurs, what else? Ghosts, right? Bigfoot, all the mysteries in life. Jack the Ripper. What happened to Princess Diana, Michael Jackson? Why did the person never text me back after 2 ticks, right? So these are all mysteries in life. You want to know? You wait until the day of judgment. It will be unraveled. Now I know. Okay. So how do dinosaurs look like, etc. Okay. All right. Next. So when we look at all this, we understand that this will be the reality of just the first verse. So breaking it down, you see there's a lot of different things that you can unpack. Okay. So we don't just look at it in terms of the literal meaning. Okay. Bismillah. Next. So the verses that follow are cited as proofs that these attributes which become clearer by observing the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of this would be pointing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Creation. One of the scholars mentioned that the Qur'an is kitab mastur, the book which is hidden. You find a lot of things that you can find. The whole universe, alam, kitab manzur, you can observe. Plants, creation, etc. The beauty in symmetry, right? Alhamdulillah. Next. Then the next set of next set of verses refer to various types of creation in the universe as proofs of the divine creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, this will be just repeating what was covered, meaning you find the flow of Surah Al-Mulk, wherever it is, it points to this. Proofs of Allah's existence, proof that Allah is showing signs within creation, what we are living with. Because Allah is sublime. We don't see, we don't know the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but creation we can see, we can experience. Okay, next. So proofs of his existence and oneness and his all-encompassing knowledge and might. We see this in the creation, right? We observe this whenever we experience hardship, whenever we experience joy, all the things in life. This is again pointing to the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But sometimes we don't, we neglect all of this. Okay, it's not something we do it willfully. It is something which just happens. It's a byproduct. Okay, next. So reference is made to those proofs of the divine. I'm just reading verbatim. Okay, omnipotence that are available in human beings themselves, who are the noblest creation. So in ourselves, you find in the Quran, Allah mentioned in different surahs, in different verses, that how is it possible that you created yourself, right? Whatever it is, the wonder of the eye, and again, you see this in when we, again, this will be the advanced technology that we have, learning about biological sciences, etc. This will be the wonder of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation. Okay, Bismillah. Next. So Allah mentions in the Quran, okay, in this particular surah, that Allah will show our signs in the universe and within themselves, human beings. Okay, whether the person is a different shaped individual, tall, young, adult, etc., childlike, right? The qualities of the person's language, the sentences, the sentence structure of the individual, etc. These are all part of Allah's creation. Okay, yeah. Next. So is it enough? Not enough. Sorry, that your Lord is a witness over all things. So when we look at this, the wonder of life in itself, we have to acknowledge the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, directly or indirectly. It's something which is a wonder. Okay? Then next will be this, that belief in God has its unique. So what would be this? What makes the person go to certain extremes or do certain things in life just on the basis of belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay, what is the how does it affect the individual who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay, so this will be how we acknowledge it. Okay, it can motivate individuals to incredible levels of action and sacrifice. So that's the easiest term for me to break it down is what's the hashtag whenever you see something good on the internet, something restored, right? Something in humanity restored. Faith in humanity restored. The person cleared out a car park or whatever it is, right? So what drives the person to do all this? It could be fame. We don't know. Allah knows best what's in the heart of the individual. It could be something else. What's the motivating factor that the person do certain things for the sake of being a good individual? Okay. All right. Bismillah. So in Surah Al-Mulk, you find indeed those in awe of their Lord without seeing Him will have forgiveness and a mighty reward. So for us, this is a reminder for us to be consistent in whatever that it is that we are doing, that we don't lose hope. Okay, that, oh, I've done all of this, but it's not doing well. Right? Does it mean that Allah is neglecting me? So sometimes it could creep into the mind of the individual. Right? But again, Allah mentions this in the Qur'an. Okay, Bismillah. So it makes individuals give up all material pleasures or sacrifice their lives for the sake of compliance with the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that again, even though we don't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly in terms of physical reality, but all of this is us acknowledging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah knows what is in the heart of the individual. Okay? Then Allah mentions in Surah Al-Hajj, and whoever honors the symbols of Allah, ذَلِكَ مَنْ يُعَزِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ. Okay? It is certainly out of taqwa al-qulub, the heart, making the individual try to prevent him or her from entering hellfire. That is the essence of taqwa. Okay? So yu'azzim sha'air Allah. Alhamdulillah, we perform the prayer that is yu'azzim sha'air Allah in a group setting. Wearing attire which is in line with the Sharia, covering our nakedness, making sure we don't show off certain things, etc. This is in line with the Sharia. Right? The adhan is the symbols of, it's called sha'air, shi'ar, sha'air. Okay, Bismillah. So now then, you have questions regarding what I've just shared. Number one is the 3 different dimensions. Number 2, characteristics of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Any questions so far? Any comments from the Zoom session? Anyone saying anything? Is it too fast, too slow? What are your thoughts? Bismillah, before we move on. Okay, so far so good. Okay, Bismillah. So now we go to the concept of what is called at-tawakkul or tawakkul or tawakkal. And again, I try to simplify. I don't like to use technical terms or jargon. So the next slide is the concept of tawakkal, which is reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so how do we approach this? Before we want to break it down, the whole concept, we have to understand what does it really mean. Okay, so in Surah Al-Mulk, Allah mentions, okay, with belief in God, and hereafter comes the power to control, harness, manage, whatever it is, the material resources of the world for the good of humanity, meaning that Allah gave us this world as a form of us to inherit in order for us to cultivate, to take care of the environment, to take care of individuals. Okay, so that is one of the main purpose of life. Other than that, what else? What are other purpose of life? What do you think? For the Muslim, it's okay. Let me ask a different question. What would be if you ask a person who doesn't believe in any religion, what is your purpose in life? What would be their answer? Pleasure. They just YOLO, right? You only live once. I don't know. I'm too old school. Maybe they have a different hashtag nowadays. You only live once, so enjoy. Okay, what else? Hedonism. You want to be a good person. You want to be a rich person, right? The easiest way for me to break it down, a purpose in life for the Muslim to consider is something which is applicable all over the world, whether the person is living in luxury or poverty. Okay, a purpose in life for the individual who is living life in this world all over the world. It's applicable to all, a standard that everyone can achieve, can attain. Okay, that's number one. Number two, it must be something which is applicable not just now, but you go back, what is it called? Retroactively, is it? Right? Yeah. So I hope I'm using the right terms. Okay. Or you can back project it from all the different years, all the different civilization, etc. You can also consider things in future generation. Okay. So whenever we're talking, sometimes again, youngsters, they say youth, it's now, it's everything which is now. They don't think of something which is in future. So later on, you start to develop the concept of wanting to invest, etc. Right? I think one of the initiative is to have that understanding personal finance, right? Recently, yeah. So you have to also take into consideration what is the Islamic element in it. So is it our property? Is there anything in relation to zakat, etc.? So that's another different dimension that you have to also consider. Okay. So the first one that we go into whenever we talk about purpose of life will be worship. That's a given, right? But other than that, the Khalifa element is something that some people sometimes disregard because it seems like it's something which must be related to religion. It's indirectly related because you're living life as a Muslim. It is already automatically part of Islam. Okay, Bismillah. So the surah goes that it is He who has made the earth subservient to you. So go about its regions and eat of Allah's provision, Allah's rizq, right? For to Him all shall be resurrected. Okay. So when we look at this, this will be how we apply the three different dimensions. Okay. So you go to the next slide. You see, it is He who has made the earth subservient to you. So this will be the iman element. Okay. Meaning it's not for us to what's the word? To transgress, to oppress others, to abuse, to take advantage of. Is there a better term? Where you take up all the natural resources, where suddenly you don't exploit, exploitation. Okay, yeah. Next. So when we talk about what does it mean when Allah say famshu fi manakibiha, so go about its regions, go travel. Okay. Wa kulu min rizqihi, and eat from His provision, meaning it is participating in things which are related to all the permissive halal manner. Okay. And refraining from things which are haram. So whenever we go traveling, we have to make sure we do it in a halal manner, which is accepted. And the accepted is not just one element. There's categories of, what is it called? Divisions of rulings. So there is the things which are considered compulsory, saving a life. If you're in the vicinity of saving another person's life and you're able to do so, it's wajib upon you to do it. It's compulsory for you to do it. It's recommended for you to do. Recommended fasting, recommended prayers, for example. The neutral part is the one which is in between. It can be something that can be leading you towards good. It can be something that leads you to something which is haram. Okay. Then next will be it's best for you to avoid, which is called in Arabic makruh. Still halal. Okay, so the best example will be eating McDonald's. It's makruh. It's best to avoid. Okay. Alhamdulillah, we have nourishing food. We try figure out. Okay. Yeah, which is haram is one element. Next, to him all shall be resurrected. So this will be the concept of the day of judgment, the day of reckoning, meaning that everyone is held accountable. And whenever we break it down, we have to understand the underlying main driving force of each particular subset in all the three different dimensions. Okay, let me break it down. So for example, Islam, you have 5 main pillars of practice. Okay, the first one, Bismillah. First one, it's okay. Again, it's okay. Don't be. I'll be here only once. I'm not going to be here again. So you don't see me again afterwards. So it's okay if you mess up. What's the first pillar of practice? What's the first pillar of practice? Yes, brother. The Shahada. Okay, professing faith. I believe in the existence of only one God. There is no other God besides Allah. The next one is that the Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So what is the significance of it? Meaning you are having this ticket entry, this subscription. It's a subscription like Netflix. You need to pay, right? This is the subscription in which you enter into Islam. No one can take that away from you, right? People can judge you, etc. But that faith is strong in you so long as you believe in it. Okay. All right. Other than that, the recommended things to say, to read the Qur'an, saying La ilaha illallah, astaghfirullah, forgive. All of those are utterances. Okay. All right. The second one, the prayer. What is the underlying main driving force? It means you have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So why am I sharing this? Because sometimes we are so into the finer details of how to perform the prayer properly, how to perform fasting properly, etc. We forgot what is the main understanding of why I'm doing this, not just as a form of ritual. Okay, so we are establishing contact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 5 times a day. Allah tells us to do it. Okay, so next, fasting, which is our bodily function, that there are certain things in life that you refrain from daylight in order for you to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, next, what else? Zakat, that not all of your property is yours. There's a certain portion which is not yours. Okay, and it doesn't go to the Ustaz or the Imam, it goes to the community. Okay, all right. Then Hajj, all of this will be, there's different understanding within it. Similarly with the articles of faith. So when we talk about the day of judgment, whenever I teach this in a teenage classroom, teenagers, they are more interested in the signs of the day of judgment. Dajjal, what else? All the creature that will be speaking, etc. All the scary things, right? But I tell them the main understanding of the day of judgment is that whatever you do in life, you are held accountable. It's accountability. Meaning, some people might experience all the good things that happen to him or her, someone take advantage of. So he or she gets bullied. Let's say, for example, you go to work, right? Later on you become a good worker. Your manager take all the credit. Okay, you've done it sincerely, dedicated, etc. But in the end, someone else takes the credit. Okay, so in life, you don't get to be someone who is at a position where you are valued. But on the day of judgment, whatever it is, because you are enduring it and you become patient, hopefully you will be rewarded. Okay. Similarly, those who've done all the bad things in life and they get away with it, there's a lot of scam, right? Scam artists, right? Whether online, etc. They can run away with. They can live a good life in this world, but on the day of judgment, divine justice, they cannot run away from it. Okay. So it's a good understanding for us. We have this, and again, some people, they might suffer a lot of different hardship, suffering, whatever it is, sadness, grief, etc. Okay, I don't use the word depression because sometimes it can be conflicted. Okay, so And the person needs to understand that this is something which is not just nowadays you can consider it as a coping mechanism, but this is back then during the time of the Prophet 1,400 years ago. So you can categorize it under coping mechanism nowadays, but it's actually something which is a solution for the person who is facing those problems. Okay, all right, Bismillah. So when we look at all this, at the same time, you can also see that it's not just the Islam or the Iman. You can also include the Ihsan element in all of this. Okay, so whenever you understand that Allah made it subservient, so how are we supposed to be humble? How are we supposed to make sure that what we are doing is the best? That is the Ihsan element. Similarly, going about on this earth, eating fruit, whatever it is that is fruitful for us, beneficial, wholesome, etc. It is element of Ihsan. Similarly, when we talk about later on we'll be resurrected. So what are we supposed to be doing? We're supposed to deal with people in life, whether Muslim or non-Muslim, in a manner in which hopefully will be honored on the day of judgment. Okay? All right. So this will be something that you can, inshallah, automatically implement whenever you see verses from the Quran translation. Okay? Bismillah, next. So when we look at all this, scholars say that we understand that even in life, when we do things and we don't get what we want, because we've already done the process, the due diligence in which we try to achieve tawakkul. Okay, so this tawakkul element, it's not just something that you try to attain through your first try, meaning there's a lot of different steps, right? To achieve that tawakkul, you have to make sure you figure out what is the best for me to do right now. Even though it may be something that I'm not really familiar with, then I try to find who are the best people to advise me. So that is the element in Islam. There's a concept which is called shura. Right? You have consultative meetings with others, experts, right? So they are the ones who will advise you. Once you are given that advice, then you can take your path. You can choose. So once you can choose, once you've already done that choice, that decision, then that is the element where you rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so you cannot just say, oh, you have to tawakkal without doing that due diligence. Okay, so it applies to all different elements, whether it's personal health, personal finance, your future career, outlook, etc. Okay, Bismillah. Next. So Allah's knowledge, hearing, sight, control reaches every soul and everything anywhere in the universe. Again, we don't deny this, but sometimes we forgot that this exists in our tradition, in our understanding. Okay, so we are reminded whenever we attend sessions like this, whenever we read the Quran, etc. So we are reminded, inshallah. Next, Bismillah. And what happens is that nothing escapes His attention or is beyond Allah's reach. When we talk about the tawakkul element, inshallah, it will be put into consideration. Okay, so sometimes some people, they have a different understanding of the whole concept of, is it something which is already written for me? The concept of al-qada wal-qadar, the last of the 6 articles of faith. Okay, the foreknowledge of Allah. The best would be to describe it as a foreknowledge of Allah. Okay, so one of our teachers taught us, Allah knowing whatever that is going to happen to every one of us in future doesn't affect our path towards it. So does that make sense? Allah knows whatever is going to happen to us in future, but Allah knowing it doesn't affect our choice in life. Okay, yeah. And again, if you are still confused with all this, I will inshallah give suggestions on maybe book recommendations or even video clips for you to inshallah look at, okay, to understand further, because it's a different topic in itself. So when I received the overview or the objectives of what was supposed to be shared, I find that this is something which is quite heavy. Talking about Allah, talking about tawakkul, talking about the mercy of Allah. So again, we have to come to an agreement on how we approach it in a way where the Muslim is supposed to understand living life in this world before we can tackle it one by one. Okay, Bismillah. We have a few more slides, inshallah. So in the Quran, Allah mentioned regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how we look at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of His attributes. This is one example you find in Surah Al-Baqarah. Okay, the next surah. is in Mujadilah. Okay, do you not see that Allah knows whatever is in the heavens and the earth, whatever that is on the earth? Okay, if then whatever that is out there, outwardly, the macro, then next you go into yourselves, right? If three to converse, then there will be meaning you're not just really independent. Again, when we look at the previous slides, I mentioned Allah centric. We have to take Allah into consideration, factor Allah in. Okay, next. So the surah talks about this. The next one would be on Bismillah, Surah Al-Hadid, that Allah mentions, and He is with you wherever you are. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. Okay, and again, if I don't understand, what does it really mean? Does it mean Allah is with me, etc.? You have to learn from scholars. So you learn from experts, tafsir scholars, people who are credible in terms of their understanding of the religion, then they will elaborate further. Okay, but for us, we take this into consideration, meaning that we are not cut off from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are not like certain religious tradition where we have to have an imam, a person to go through. It doesn't work that way. We have a direct connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through our prayers, or fast, to our salat, dua, etc. Okay, all right, Bismillah. This is one of the many facts in our existence that we shall never be able to encompass and comprehend. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's presence or essence. Okay, but Allah mentions that Allah is close, and we cannot see Him, and we shall not be able to conceive the reality of the divine essence or form. And again, this is the study of metaphysics or Tawheed, etc. But again, we don't delve too much into this. Bismillah. So how do we react to this knowledge? Okay. There's a practice in which the Prophet ﷺ make this supplication, this dua. Okay. So I'll read the translation. Okay. In the name of Allah, I trust in Allah, for there is no power or might but in Allah. We seek protection. We ask Allah for protection. And whenever it's a dua, the easiest way for me to describe it, there's only three elements of a dua. One would be to ask Allah for something favorable. That's number one. Number two, to seek protection against things which are disastrous or harmful. Okay. The third one is dua, the makeup of a dua, the content of a dua. The third one would be we humble ourselves before Allah. We acknowledge Allah's greatness. So any dua, it's either one of the three. Okay, the third one, sometimes it's called munajat. You are complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Singaporeans' favorite hobby. Complaining to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Oh Allah, I'm so weak in my faith. Oh Allah, I'm so uncompromising in terms of my laziness towards you, etc. Therefore, you ask for something good, or you ask for protection against harm. Therefore, increase me in terms of iman, increase me in terms of my appreciation to, etc., etc. Or therefore, protect me against whatever that is harmful. So that is the makeup of a dua. You look at any form of dua, it's either one of those three. Okay. Okay. So this will be how we find in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. And how do we go about acknowledging this? Will be this. Okay. So hopefully there's a lot more, but I will share the PDF. It's actually an elaboration of all this concept of acknowledging Allah, instilling tawakkul. It's actually just a form of like a repeated element. So I will inshallah end with this. Okay, that all we need to appreciate is our total dependence on Allah's mercy, grace, compassion, power, might, and generosity. Okay, and the complete insignificance of everything else that can be falsely attributed as God's or godly-like status besides Him. So anything which is taking up our time. Okay, so whenever it's with worship, it's our time, our wealth, our energy. Okay, so whether it's TikTok, what else? Karaoke, fishing, golfing, right? Yeah. So any of the hobbies I mentioned, maybe it's your favorite. Okay. Yeah. Just take it into consideration. Meaning you have to be balanced. So don't worship it. Don't consider it as a form of worship that you totally idolize it. That's the thing that I wanted to say. Okay. So hopefully you've benefited from whatever that I've shared. It's already 9:05. Right. And again, the slides will be available Okay, I don't know if the committee here wants to charge the slides for the food or whatever it is. Okay, so hopefully it has been beneficial. At least it can give you like a starting point to reflect on the verses in Surah Al-Mulk, on practicing Islam, on being a person who's more committed to being a good Muslim, right? Whether you have, because everyone, we are not perfect, we are not angels. We have certain things in life that needs figuring it out and making it into a better position. Being a good sibling, a good child to parents, a friend, a student, what else? If you're taking care of, they call it the sandwich generation, you're taking care of parents plus you're taking care of children, right? So you're stuck. So there's a lot of different ways to navigate through life, inshallah, right? So I hope it has been beneficial. Any questions? Bismillah. I pass to you.
Okay, thank you, Ustaz, for the wonderful sharing. May we all benefit from the knowledge that Ustaz have shared with us. And maybe I can just share some of the takeaways that Ustaz have shared with us. So firstly, Ustaz mentioned about the 3 different dimensions, which is on Islam, Iman, and Ihsan, and how it's applicable in everything that we do in our daily lives. And then Ustaz went on to share about the concept of tawakkul. Basically, it's to have reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as Muslims, we should always be consistent in whatever that we do and not lose hope. I think it's easy for us to, it's a easy concept, but when we are in a position where we are facing difficulty, it's always important to always remind ourselves that Allah is with us, and to have the concept of Allah centric in whatever that we do. Okay, Alhamdulillah. We'll now move on with the Q&A session. So we have a few questions for Ustaz. Okay, maybe we shall proceed with the first one. So, Assalamualaikum Ustaz. May you expound a little on what do you mean by we monopolize religion, as well as who is the we referring to? Thank you.
Yeah, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's not really something which is like pointing fingers at others. We're not trying to blame people with having this mindset. But again, like I mentioned, because all of us, we are so busy with our life, sometimes we want to justify certain things that we do, and we want to put religion as a label for it. Okay, so for example, if you're a businessman and you're doing business during Ramadan, right? You use it as a form of like you make it like monopolizing it for the sake of saying that this is part of the religion, that what I'm doing is something which is religiously inclined for me to do so. Okay, whether it's Hajj, whether it's prayer, etc. You can create spaces in which it's considered as something that you hold autonomy of, as if it's like you deciding it is part of the religious practice or something like that. Okay, so I hope that answers the question. Yeah, so it's like an understanding or a mindset. It's not really blaming anyone, but this is something that sometimes creep into our minds. Yeah. Okay, Bismillah. You want me to read? Which one? The second one? Okay, Bismillah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. May you expound a little on what? This is the first one. If our heart is hurt by someone's actions, okay, is it permissible to pray to him to stay away from them? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to stay away from them. Niyah, intention is not to cut off ties of kinship, but to not relieve the pain. Sorry. Okay, so when we talk about relationships in Islam, again, when we look at the halal haram element, okay, so this is again, sometimes it's like what I mentioned, it will be gaps in how we approach teaching, learning, observing, practicing Islam. When we look at the halal haram element, there's the haram element, which is anything which is harmful, which is leading you towards sinning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's considered as haram, right? Other than that, it could be within the 4 different categories. It could be a relationship which is compulsory. It could be a relationship which is recommended. It could be a relationship which is neutral. It can be good, it can be bad. Or it could be something which is best to avoid, a relationship which is best to avoid. Okay, so relationship which is haram, of course, it's something which is, if let's say you still cannot categorize certain relationships, whether it's halal or haram, then the best is for me to advise you to figure out who would be best to explain to you. Okay, so in this case, because you know that this is, and again, sometimes whenever it is pertaining to personal, individual, sometimes it's not really, and again, this is quite controversial, because some people, they want to find answers through religion, whereas sometimes it's not directly religion giving the answer. I give you an example. Example would be things which are related to psychological trauma, mental health issues. So not necessarily, yes, there might be certain things that you can do within the religion, but it's not something which the religion say is the main solution. Okay, you still need to seek counseling, you still need to go for maybe certain therapy, CBT, etc. Okay, CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. So there's a lot of different things involved. Okay, so therefore, sometimes, unfortunately, some asatizas or scholars, etc., they might not be well aware of all this, so they want to try to answer it. Because, and again, I mentioned this to some of my friends. One of my friends who is a teacher of Al-Qur'an, and he's a really good street smart Ustaz. Okay, so then I mentioned to him, sometimes unfortunately our asatizas or our friends, because he or she is so into learning Islam and Quran, like 20 years, 30 years, just reading the Quran and perfecting, right? So to him, everything is Quran. So whenever he goes somewhere in the masjid, oh, the imam doesn't, his Quran is not so good, right? So because everything, I think there's a term for it, to someone, to a hammer, right? Is it? Everything is a nail, right? So everything you see, or it's not necessarily that way. Okay, all right. Bismillah. So I hope that answers the question. Next. Okay, the one which is on top, right? Okay. Bismillah. If we leave something for his sake, Allah's sake, are there signs to know if he is rida? Rida is content with our action. Okay, especially when the consequences brings us emotional, mental discomfort for long periods. And again, I think I just mentioned, sometimes you understand that in life, it's best to try and seek out advice through people who are experts in these types of fields. Okay, and again, it can be difficult because you don't have a lot. So this is a fardu kifaya. You have to find who would be best to teach. The late scholar Dr. Malik Badri. Okay, I would recommend, if you're interested in this in the study of psychological health or Islamic psychology, then there's this late scholar, rahimahullah. He recently passed away, Dr. Malik Badri. There's a good book, Cyber Counseling for Muslims. Really, really good book. It's a very easy Q&A to read book. Okay, yeah. So he is able to navigate both because he's an expert in both Western psychology plus Islamic psychology. I think he's the late scholar is either Sudanese or Somali. Okay, yeah. So you need to understand that Islam, Muslim scholars, yes, they've already mentioned about certain things that can affect a person's mental condition, a person's psychological trauma, whatever it is, suffering, hardship. Okay, so we don't be quick to give judgment. We don't be quick to also label certain things as whether it is something which is a sign of Allah accepting our situation or not accepting. Okay, so in the Quran, is it mentioned in the Quran? Allah mentions in Surah Al-Balad, if I'm not mistaken, the one where Rabbi Ahanan or Rabbi Akraman. Anyone remembers this verse? That Kalla when the disbelievers, they say that this is Allah honoring us, that gives us wealth. Okay? So whenever they see decrease in their wealth, they say that this is Allah dishonoring, this is Allah making our position as a lowly, degrading us. It doesn't work that way. Kalla. Allah says no, it doesn't work that way. It's not like how we perceive. Okay, so again, it's something which is difficult because people experience certain things in life, but how do we navigate? It's either we know how to figure it out, or sometimes we require assistance. So that assistance could be counseling sessions, people who you can go to for advice, inshallah. I mean, so we make dua as well, inshallah. Okay. All right, Bismillah. Any other questions? Okay, Bismillah. Is it possible to be a close? Sorry, let me see. Change. Okay, it goes up. Salam Ustaz, alaikum salam. Could you explain about the different levels of sabr and tawakkal? Sabr will be patience, tawakkal will be reliance on Allah. And what are the characteristics of one having excellent sabr and excellent tawakkal? The best answer would be what we can find if we want to look into the Qur'an. Of course, the role model that we have would be the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The next would be Surah Yusuf, Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, right? So when we talk about different levels of sabr and tawakkal, there's a lot of different scholars. The thing about learning Islam at a university level is that you go into details of the differences of opinions of scholars. So which one is the best? There's no answer to which is the best description of categories of tawakkal, sabr, etc. Okay, so one of our scholars mentioned that sabr does not have a limit. If there is a limit, it's not sabr, it's not patience. It's tolerance. It could be, or another different description would be the extreme element of the person enduring and having patience is the last straw would be ridha, acceptance. Meaning I'm okay, I'm it's not you giving up, but it's actually you are content with whatever it is that is considered as a hardship that you are willing to take on. Okay, and again, these are things which are difficult to describe. Okay, can I use the whiteboard? Where do I? Over there. Okay, so I wanted to show. I wanted to show the different elements of an individual experiencing life. Okay, so this is an example of a person. Okay, so this is a Muslimah, right? So it's either the person experience joy. This is based on Imam Ghazali. He said everyone is either in this 4 different states. It's either joy, the opposite would be sad. Okay. Yeah, I hope you can see. Maybe because of the highlighting. Okay, the person is either in a state of obedience, obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in a state of disobedience. Okay, the opposite. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So whenever you're in one of these states, right, there are 2 different things for you to either, again, this is your choice. You choose to either do the positive or be in a state of negative. So for obedience, there's a positive, there's a negative. Disobedience, there's a positive, there's a negative. Joy, there's positive, there's a negative in reaction to your state. Okay, so for joy, it would be shukr, the station of gratitude. You're supposed to show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The negative of joy is haughtiness, meaning you extravagance, riya, etc. Okay, sadness, you're supposed to exercise patience. The opposite would be blaming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, negative. For obedience, you're supposed to be consistent. Then there's some scholars say it's it could be showing off, right? Riya. Similarly, disobedience, what's the best thing for you to do? Repentance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. what's negative you're not supposed to be doing, which is continuing to be in a state of disobedience. Okay, so when we look at all of this is based on Imam Ghazali's understanding. Okay, and Imam Ghazali died 1111, very easy to remember. So Imam Ghazali 1111, Imam Nawawi 1234, very easy to remember. Okay, those are scholars. All right, so I hope that answers the question. Next, Bismillah. And again, some I might give a more elaborate answer if you want me to, which is not in the session. Okay. Okay, one more, inshallah. Bismillah. Which one is it? Okay, this one. Bismillah. Is it possible to be a close, dear friend and someone who is special towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What are the steps to achieve that, inshallah? Okay. So when we look at how to be a good friend and someone to be close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, special towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is it the same person or is it the friend who is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay, so I'm guessing, is it possible for that individual to be a good, close friend and that individual to be close, special to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Am I right? Okay, so to be a good, close friend to others, we can not just look at, because sometimes when, like what I mentioned, because my background is in Islamic studies, so we've done a lot of reading on hadith, on the life of companions, etc., because we can find certain universal values which you can still apply. Okay, but it doesn't mean that you just focus on that. Okay, because the Qur'an talks about how to be a good companion, etc. Companion in terms of traveling companion, which is very interesting, which is still applicable nowadays. Like if you take Grab or whatever it is, you're supposed to be a good traveling companion, entertain the individual, make the person comfortable. So if you're doing that for the sake of Allah, you get the reward for doing it. Very interesting, right? Okay. So when we look at all this, we have to again go back to what is the halal haram element of being a good friend. Okay, not transgressing certain boundaries. And sometimes some people find it very difficult, especially if it's something which is sketchy in the first place. So sometimes it becomes the boundaries very difficult. Okay, so you have to, again, the best is to have good companionship with people who you know of good character. Okay, so you find this and again, it's not just Islamic or something which is part of religion. You find this even in modern psychology. Who's the person? Anyone read Atomic Habits? No? Productivity. Okay, so even the person talks about, in order for you to be a good professional, whatever it is, athlete, etc., be surrounded by people who are similar. You look up to. Even I think Jordan Peterson mentions this. Dress like someone who you look up to. Be like someone, speak like someone. Okay, even though he's controversial, we're talking about the concepts. Okay, so similarly, you find this, even modern reality, modern psychology consider this as something which is valid. You look at your tradition, our tradition, Islam, then we're supposed to increase our appreciation, because this is something which is already established 1,400 years ago. Imagine 1,000 years ago, scholars, they've already delved into all this. Sohbah. Okay, I think one of the scholars who wrote about this will be 17th century. Sheikh Al-Sha'rani, Abdul Al-Sha'rani, talks about sohbah, companionship. Okay, so yes, companionship is very, very important. Okay, who is the person? Like, I think there's also the adage, right? Show me who your friends, I will tell you who you are, something like that, right? So it's something which is universal. Okay, so in that sense, once you know the halal haram element, how is it possible for me to introduce ihsan in this relationship as being a good friend? Whenever he or she is in need, whenever the person's family members experience something which is a form of tragedy, whatever it is, what do you do? Consolation, what do you do in terms of trying to bring about cheerfulness? There's also this hadith where it's something which is neglected as well, introducing idkhal surur. Okay, so one of the things that we experience in Egypt on Eid, on Eidul Fitri, Eidul Adha, you go to the mosque, you perform the prayer, you find families where they have young children, they'll tell their child to go each row by row, and they'll give sweets, which is very interesting. So this is a form of idkhal surur. Imagine if the person is very old, very lonely, and suddenly there's this young boy or girl giving sweets. Idkhal surur, give the person a sense of belonging, cheerfulness, etc. So that is a form of hadith. Okay, yeah. So then there's also a hadith where the Prophet mentioned, if the person is, there's a lot of different hadith. Imam Nawawi's 40 collection of hadith, you find this as well. If you sahalallahu, if you, or man satara, right? If you cover the misgivings of someone, right? What else? Allah will cover your nakedness, your misgivings on the day of judgment, right? If you lighten the burden of someone, right? Then there's another hadith where the Prophet mentioned, you do something which is assisting your companion on hardship, whatever that he or she is suffering. This is better than performing i'tikaf, performing seclusion, spiritual seclusion in the masjid, which is very interesting. Okay, so these are things which again we whenever we are reminded of all this, we try to take part in it. We try to find opportunities in which we can put it into practice. Okay, it could be something that is existing. It could be something that maybe I want to do this. It's part of my 2022 plan that at least I want to help out, volunteer or whatever it is. I want to give cheerfulness to others or friends, whatever it is, inshallah. Okay, so hopefully we don't just share and acknowledge that it exists, but we also participate. Hopefully we are, when we do this, we are practicing our religion. We're making sure that it doesn't go extinct. Allahu alam bisawab, and Allah knows best. Okay.
Alhamdulillah, thank you, Ustaz, once again for the beautiful sharing. May Allah reward you with the best of rewards. Amin. Okay, so as for our Blossoming Car series, we actually have a special segment at the end where we will be reading Surah Al-Mulk together. So this is with the hopes of inculcating the habit of reciting Al-Mulk every night before we go to bed, inshallah. So hopefully even after these events, we can inculcate that habit in us, inshallah. So with that, I would like to invite Brother Amin to the front to lead us with the recitation. Brother Amin, please.
Auzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Allahumma aftah alayya ya hikmataka wa anshur alayya rahmataka wa zakir ni ma nasitu ya dal jalali wal ikram. Auzubillahi minasyaitonirrajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Tabarakalladzi biyadihil mulku wa huwa ala kulli syai'in qadir. Alladzi khalaqal mauta wal hayata liyabluwakum ayyukum ahsanu amala wa huwal azizul ghafur. Alladzi khalaqa sab'a samawati tibaqa ma tara fi khalqir rahmani min tafawut farjil basara hal tara min futur. ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نأكل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسوقا لأصحاب السعير إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاسبا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العظيم.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, Brother Amin, for the citation. And okay, so inshallah, next week we'll be having our last session for our Blossoming Barakah series, which will be raised by Ustaz Ahmad Hilmi, Muhammad Hasbi. So Ustaz, inshallah, will be covering on the trials and tribulations and the purification of the heart. It will be on next Monday instead of Tuesday. So yeah, just take note. Same place, same timing, inshallah. Yeah. So we would also like to thank our sponsors for making our events possible. Do check them out on their social media platforms and give them your support. May Allah reward them abundantly for their generosity. Amin. Okay, we also greatly appreciate if you could send us your feedback on our sessions, and yeah, this is for us to improve in the future, inshallah. So maybe I'll just leave this on for a few seconds. Okay. Okay, do follow our social media platforms as well, our Instagram, our Telegram channel, for any future updates. Okay, with that, let's end off this session with Tasbih Kafara and Surah Al-Aus. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين. With that, we have come to the end of the session. Hope to see all of you next week, inshallah. Till then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.